Hello everybody, I've got a quick video here. I want to talk about forced passing. So there's been some questions, I've gotten some questions, I've seen questions about forced passing. So let me run through a quick example of forced passing. So we have a quick scenario where all of these cars entered the corner at the speed you see last turn. The Penske paid a wear to get in the hundreds, and the Tyrrell paid 2 and a chance to go 180 into the 120. And now they're pretty much all stuck at that speed, so we'll move them out. So this would be 8 spaces for the Tyrrell, or 6, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces, right? An 8th space would be here, and a 9th space would be there. So the fact that the Tyrrell has enough speed to go past the blockade is crucial to the forced pass. If the Tyrrell was only going 160, which would have put the Tyrrell there, then there's no opportunity for a forced pass. The Tyrrell has to obey the movement rule that you can't go through another space, and would actually have to slow down. So they would have to either spend a wear to, they effectively have to late brake. So they could either spend a wear or roll on the deceleration table, either way. But because they're going 180, so they could pass both cars or pass into a legally occupiable space, then they can do a forced pass. So the first thing the Tyrrell gets to do is they get to decide who they're going to pass, because that car then gets to make a decision about whether they're going to block or not. And as long as it's a space, the car is occupying a space that the Tyrrell can legally move through to get to where the Tyrrell wants to end up, then it can pick. So let's say the Tyrrell picks the Ferrari. And it doesn't mean the Tyrrell has to end up in front of the Ferrari. The Tyrrell can end up here. That's fine. So the Ferrari now has to make a decision. And let's look at these two tables here. So there's forced passing unblocked and forced passing blocked. And you'll see that unblocked is successful on an 8 or less, and blocked is successful on a 6 or less. And that's actually a pretty significant difference there. So the Ferrari gets to make a decision about that. If the Ferrari decides to block, it's going to make the Tyrrell's chance to pass much lower. But if there's this line at the bottom here about damage, about wear loss, possible wear loss. So by attempting to block, there's a chance that there'll be some damage. Either or both cars might lose wear. And I'll explain how that works in a second. So that's the decision that the Ferrari has to make in this situation. Let's say the Ferrari decides to block, because that's a more interesting scenario for us to go through. So Ferrari's going to block. So now the Tyrrell gets to decide to spend wear, or skill to modify the die roll, 1 or 2 or 3 if they have a 3 skill chip. So let's say they apply a 1. And then and then they roll some dice. So we're going to fake roll dice. So let's say this is the result. So first thing we do is we see if it's a success. So 5 minus 1 is 4. So that would be a success on the blocked table. So the Tyrrell ends up there. Now, let's say it was something like this. So, or even worse, something like this. So 10 minus 1 would be 9. That would not be a success on the forced block table. That would be a failure. So let's talk about that first. In a success, you just put the car where you want it to be, and you're done. And then you would look at damage. But before we do that, let's talk about a failure. So if you fail, you stay where you go back to the row before, and now you have to slow down. You have to slow down effectively enough spaces so that this is how far you moved. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I moved 7 spaces. So I actually have to slow down from 180 to 140. So that would be 2 wear or a wear and a test brakes in order to get down to that speed. And then that would be 140 going for the next turn from that position. Let's talk real quick about, in theory, it could be even far. If it wouldn't have worked in this scenario because of the corner, but if for some reason I was going 200 and I would have actually ended up there, and I failed my forced pass, I would have had to have basically gotten rid of 60 miles. It's usually easier to actually figure out how many spaces you're going to have to back up than how many spaces you moved, but I would have had to, again, gone only 140, and I would have had to have gone from 200 to 140. That's actually 60 decel, so that would have been 2 wear and a test brakes. No, you can't spend 3 wear in that scenario. So that's the possible problems with failing. Failing a forced pass can be really bad. Now, let's say I succeed or fail. It doesn't really matter. And let's look at this die roll. So, and let's look at this chart again. So at the bottom of the chart, we talk about how much wear could be lost. So the defender loses a wear for every 3 rolled. And what that means is we actually look physically at the dice. It's not, was the total result a 3? It's, are there any 3s? No, there's a 4 and a 6. But a 4 actually means the attacker loses a wear. And remember, the attacker's in this case, the Tyrrell. So the Tyrrell would have to lose a wear. And this is another situation where the generic rule that if a car does not have a wear to spend, but is required to for a table, then they spin. So if the Tyrrell made this pass, despite rolling a 4, so let's say they did this, then they would have to, and they didn't have the wear to spend for the penalty, then they would actually spin right there. And you do see that sometimes because a lot of times forced passes will happen at the end of the race and cars are out of wear. So you can have a number of different scenarios here. You could have, if you rolled a 4 and a 3, both cars would lose wear. You could roll 2 4s, which means the attacker would actually have to lose 2 wear, or 2 3s, which would mean the defender would have to lose 2 wear. But you can also have scenarios where no one ends up losing anywhere. Okay, that's a 3, but again, it's the actual, each die, it's not the total. So in this case, no one would lose anywhere. So that's your basic scenario. And actually, let's talk about one other, which is what happens in corners. So let's have this conversation. So let's say the Tyrrell is going 160. I don't care what the other cars were going, and will end up here. So he goes through the Penske, yellow Penske. So there's an interesting question here into what order do things happen, because the Tyrrell actually has 2 things the Tyrrell has to do this turn. There's a forced pass, but there's also going to have to be a 2 wear and a chance spent in the corner. So the first thing that happens in this case is the forced pass, because if the Tyrrell does not actually, the rule of the forced pass in the corner is you do not deal with the corner space, the space that you are passing through, unless this pass is successful. So if the Tyrrell gets blocked and doesn't make the pass, then the Tyrrell never gets that space and does not deal with the corner. If the Tyrrell does succeed in the pass, then the Tyrrell will have to deal with the corner. So in this case, we would attempt the forced pass first. If the Tyrrell is unsuccessful, the Tyrrell will end up there. We'll have to slow down, however much it has to slow down. So let's say to 120, or and not deal with the corner this turn. The Tyrrell will deal with the corner next turn when it moved again. Or if it succeeded and ended up there, it would have to spend the 2 wear and roll the chance. Again, another interesting situation, which is if the Tyrrell spins from here, then the Tyrrell backs up to the row where technically the Tyrrell would have spun there, because that is the space where the Tyrrell had to pay for the corner. So if the Tyrrell spins there, obviously you can't put it on that space. There's a car there. The rule is you put it on this in a try and find a space in the row next to that space. So if the Ferrari wasn't there, we'd put the Tyrrell there, spun. However, the Ferrari is there. So then we keep going back until we find an empty row to put the Tyrrell, which would actually be right here, right? So that's the next space further back. There's no car there. So that would be where the Tyrrell would be spun. I often put cars backwards when they're spun, just a visual. So that is how that would work. So again, you don't deal with the corner till you get there. So a different scenario would be if the Tyrrell is coming through here at 180, let's say. In this case, the Tyrrell would have to pay for the corner first, because the Tyrrell hits this space before attempting the forced pass. So the Tyrrell would have to do the 2 wear and the chance here. and deal with any consequences of that. And if the corner is successful, then could keep moving, assuming it had enough speed, right, to get through here and attempt the forced pass. So in paying for the corner here at 2 wear and a chance, let's say successfully, if the Tyrrell were to fail the forced pass and end up here and slow down, let's say to 140, in this case, it's a bit of a waste having paid for that corner because of the forced pass. It not actually getting that benefit, but that's kind of the chance you take with a risky move like that. But that's the general rule for how you deal with that situation. So hopefully this has been helpful and cleared up some questions about that. If you got any other more questions, please feel free to add them in the comments, and I will answer them as best I can. Thank you.